I'm sharing my screen. Right. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Okay.
You're
And
really quiet.
my volume's low. Can you hear me better?
Yes.
I can
A little bit.
A little bit better? Let me see if my okay. Is it better now? My volume?
Much better.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Victoria.
All right. And then let me can you see the box or any boxes? Are the boxes um
I just see your document that says choose this day. I don't see anything in front of it.
okay. All right. So hello everyone and happy Sabbath. Like last time, I'm going to use my PowerPoint presentation as like my whiteboard slash projector. So I hope it works well like it did the last time. The title of my study is Choose This Day, and it's based from the scripture Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, which is what we'll be focusing on today. This is part one of a two-part study. I'll be presenting part one today and part two in Florida for the USA camp meeting. So this was just a quick introduction. As I always say, this is an interactive study, so I encourage everyone's participation. Please feel free to speak up and participate. I have a difficult time keeping up with the chat while teaching, so I will not be watching the chat. If someone would like to share the comments or questions, put in the chat, that would be great. I'll leave a moment for comments and questions, but depending on the time, I might limit amount the sharing just to be able to finish the first part of my study. But please please feel free to share your comments or questions as they come up because I don't want anyone to forget or anything. So with that said, I'll begin my study with a short review and then develop the study as I move along. Thank you. Okay. So in the line of Eden to Eden, we see that since the fall of humanity, God has been doing a work of restoration, restoring humanity to themselves or in their image, preparing a people for their coming, or we can say preparing a counterpart that will stand as Christ's representatives on earth and in heaven. In this line of progression, we mark four key histories of reform: the line of Moses, the line of Christ, the line of the Millerites, and the line of the 144,000, which depicts two groups of people: literal Israel, which make up the beginning and end of ancient Israel, and spiritual Israel, which make up the beginning and end of modern Israel, whom God works with to complete their mission. We know that the Alpha histories are lines of failure and the Omega histories are lines of success. So we can cut up these reform lines and overlay them to learn what prior histories are telling us about our own. In my study, I'm going to be focusing on the beginning of ancient Israel and overlaying it with our history, the end of modern Israel, which is 144,000 lines. As a reminder, the lines of Moses is an alpha history, which is a history of failure because they failed to complete their job function and went into captivity, and Christ does not come in their history. This differs from the Omega history because it is a history of success. God's people complete their job function and prepare the way for Christ's advent, and Christ comes in the Omega history. The Alpha history has a different structure than the Omega history, but we can still overlay these histories to glean what it is telling us about our own. Any questions, thoughts, or comments? So in each reform line, we note two leaders. Can anyone tell me the name of the leaders in each of these histories? So for the beginning of ancient Israel, what is the first leader?
Moses?
Yes. And who's the second leader?
Joshua?
Sorry, these boxes are not probably gonna be,
No, you're doing great.
okay. For time. And then we can go with the end of ancient Israel. Who's the first leader?
John the Baptist?
Yep. And then the second leader?
Christ, no, Jesus.
Yep. I'll stay here with the typing. But, and then yes, it's Christ, the second leader. And then for modern Israel, the beginning of modern Israel, who is the first leader?
Would it be William Miller and then
Yeah.
Ellen White?
William Miller is the
Okay.
first leader.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else want to help out with the second leader?
I don't think I'm right. Snow. Gloria says Snow.
Yes, Samuel Snow. That's right. And then anyone want to share who's the first leader for the end of modern Israel?
Jeff
Yep,
Kippinger.
Elder Jeff, yes. And who's the second leader? You should all know.
I get them, I think Elder Parmenter, but it could be Elder Test too. I get that confused.
No worries, it's Elder Parmenter. So good, yeah. So these are the two leaders within these histories. Slide. Okay, so as mentioned, we can overlay our alpha history to glean what it is teaching us about our own. In my study, I'm going to be looking at the beginning of ancient Israel, specifically focusing on Joshua. Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. Any questions or comments or thoughts? Wow, it's quite clean. Okay, let's keep going. So could I have someone read this verse, Joshua chapter 24, verse 15?
Go ahead and read it.
I'll read it for you. Oh, go ahead, Logina.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Joshua 24, verse 15. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your ancestors served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Thank you, Regina. Susan, can you read the next one? The next two verses, please?
Sure. Joshua 24, 24, and 25. And the people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and their voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made for them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem.
Thank you. So this is important. I know our focus is on Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, but this is important to note the response of God's people at that time. Okay. So before we delve into this verse, I want to provide some context. The context for this verse begins in Joshua chapter 23 and ends in Joshua chapter 24. And if you look in your Bible, it should have a header beginning at chapter 23. In my Bible, it is titled as His Address to Israel. The pronoun his is referring to Joshua, and the chapter tells us this. So now the title may vary depending on the Bible you have. The Bible I am referring to is the Mission Study Bible, so I'm going by the title shown in the Bible I have, which reads his, or we can say Joshua's address to Israel. I'm going to paraphrase leading up to Joshua chapter 24, verse 15 to provide some context. So at this time, the people are under the leadership of Joshua. Joshua is much older in age and believes he doesn't have much time left. So he gathers all the men, and at this time, it was literally all the men of Israel, and gives his last warning for them to remain loyal to God, as God has been faithful to them by reviewing the way in which God has led them out of Egypt or captivity, and then encourages them to complete their assignment. Can I have someone read this quote for me, please?
I can.
Thank you.
Spirit of Prophecy quote from Patriarchs and Prophets 5:23.1. By Joshua's direction, the ark had been brought from Shiloh. The occasion was one of great solemnity, and this symbol of God's presence would deepen the impression he wished to make upon the people. After presenting the goodness of God toward Israel, he called upon them, in the name of Jehovah, to choose whom they would serve. The worship of idols was still to some extent secretly practiced, and Joshua endeavored now to bring them to a decision that should banish this sin from Israel. He said, "If it seem evil unto you to serve Jehovah," he said, "choose you this day whom ye will serve."
Thank you. So this just adds further context. So we're going to continue. So going back to the verse, we are going to use some rules to gain a correct understanding of this verse. So I'm going to read the verse again, Joshua 24, verse 15. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your ancestors served, which were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. According to William Miller's rule number 1, every word has its importance. We know that this is subjective and depends on a person's study. So for the focus of my study, the word that has the most importance is choose. So the word choose to me is relatively a simple word, and I have an idea of what the word choose means. But this is where it can get tricky and lead to mistakes, because my knowledge and understanding of what the word choose means may not be what it originally meant at the time it was used or written. And this is a simple example. There are many other examples where the verses are more complex. I've learned that it is important to be cautious, because if not, it can result in mistakes and wrong applications. So the rule of first mention looks at when the word was first used to define what the word means. So I use the Strong's Concordance to find where the word choose was first mentioned in the Bible. And it took me to Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, which reads, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Here provides more depth to the word's usage and providing an example. The men took them wives of all which they chose. So the verse gives us a clue that the word choose has something to do with an selection. All right. So according to looking at William Miller's rule number 5, the Bible is its own dictionary. So I suggest the word or is also important, as it helps us define the word choose within the verse itself. Does that make sense? So basically, I am saying that the word or tells us more about what the word choose means. And if that's a little bit still difficult to understand, then I'll break it down as we continue. So I didn't need to leave the verse. The verse defines the word choose for me using the word or. Hope that makes sense. For example, you either have this one or that one. heaven or hell, life or death. The word or indicates an option. So what is God's servant asking us to do? What is God's servant asking us to do? Anyone?
Choose one.
Good, pick one.
One.
So how many options are we given in this verse? Would anyone like to guess how many options we're given in this verse?
I see two.
2? Anyone else want to take a guess? Anyone agree with Christine? There are 2? You have to call on names.
Maybe 3, because it's got one side of the river, and then the Amorites, and then also where Joshua is going to be.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just saw that. Yeah, 3.
So you change your answer, Christine? You change your answer.
Yeah, unless that's a repeat and enlarge. I'm not sure about the gods your ancestors served and the gods of the Amorites. But it looks like 3.
Okay, why did you say 2 at first?
I guess I was thinking other gods and the Lord being two choices, but it looks like he's given him 3. I'm not sure.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, so I say there are 3 options in here, but 2 options is the correct response I was looking for. So the reference to the gods which your ancestors served or the gods of the Amorites are one and the same. They have a similar purpose. They are both examples of false gods that people create in their own image. So Joshua is speaking with authority, conviction, and I believe with some sassiness or style. He's saying you can serve this God, that God, or whatever false God you choose. But as for me and my house, we're going to worship the Lord. The meaning of the 2 false gods may serve some purpose, but for my study, one is noise. I suggest that we are given 2 options, and the third is noise. So here, I'm going to put it there. Does that make sense? Everyone following along with that thought?
Yeah, that was good.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to break it down some more. Back to Strong's Concordance. The Hebrew code for the word choose is H977, which means select. I then looked up the word select in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, which defined the word select to mean pick out or to make a choice. So the verse is presenting 2 options. We either choose to worship a God created in our own image, which is represented as the Apis bull, or we can choose to worship the one true God, our creator. Any questions, thoughts, or comments?
Just one. So there's another option to the 3. There's the other gods, there's the true God, and then there's neither. There's our own way, our own thoughts.
Could that fit into a God made in our own image?
Oh, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other thoughts or comments? That was a good question or good thought to share. No, okay, so let's keep going. So the concept of making a choice is not new. From the very beginning, God has offered a choice, telling their people to choose, to make a choice of whom they will serve. And throughout progressive histories, we can see similar patterns. To Adam and Eve, it was posed as either eat from all the other trees or eat from the forbidden tree. And that reference is Genesis chapter 2, verse 16 and 17. To the Israelites in the time of Elijah, the prophet, it was posed as you either follow God or Baal. And that's 1 Kings 18, verse 20 through 40. If you need me to repeat these references, just let me know. Okay. To the multitude before Pontius Pilate, it was posed as either I release to you Jesus called the Christ or Barabbas. And that references Matthew 27, verse 16 through 17. And in the general great controversy, as the bigger picture, to the angels, it was framed as you either serve Michael or Lucifer. To Jesus, it was framed as you either worship God or the ruler of this world. References John 12, verse 31 for that. And to us, it is framed as you either serve Christ or Satan. Are there any other examples I can add to this list? Anyone? Or did I cover them all? Anyone?
There's probably more, but I can't think of them.
Okay. Anyone else?
I can say like democracy or dictatorship. I'm saying now in America.
Okay.
Nice.
What about patterns in the Bible? Or examples in the Bible? Like to add to this list.
Evil and good,
Sorry?
or bad and good. I don't know.
Okay, so it's just basically listing the options of which and how God has throughout offered a choice to whom we can serve. It's either God or another alternative, as you can see within these examples. So we can either serve the true God or we can serve another God. Okay, so continuing on.
How about like Acts 27 with Paul and, if you were following Paul or God of the Sea?
One more time, Latina, sorry, I didn't hear.
The Acts 27,
Mhm.
when they're in the ship and they're either going to follow
That's
Paul.
a good one. Yeah, that's good.
It's a good one. I think it's Castor and Pollux is the other option, right?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. That's a good one.
Good
There's a couple in the chat too.
Can someone repeat it?
Christ and I'll read them. Christ and Mammon. Let me find out. A God or Mammon, Caesar
Oh,
or
yeah.
Christ.
Yes, those are good ones. Thank you.
Michael versus the Prince of Persia. And I think that's all. That's all I saw.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Then I also thought of the Apis bull versus true God.
Okay, yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. So a common theme that I have noticed in the messages that God has given us through their messengers is choice. They all center around us having to make a choice. For instance, the message of time informs us when to choose. The message of the nature of humanity, rather, I should say, part of the message of the nature of humanity informs us about our ability to choose or our will to choose. The message of the two streams informs us how to choose. The message of the Apis bull informs us about whom and whom not to choose. And the message of the two ships informs us what will happen when we choose. I think as God is asking us to make a choice, they are also gracing us to make the right choice. Any questions, thoughts, or comments?
Susan said that this presentation is prophetically and perfectly timed, which because of the choices we have to make coming up, it really is.
Any other questions or thoughts or comments, or how did that sit with you? Anybody agree, disagree with the theme that I've noticed?
I agree.
Who was that? Who said that? Who said I agree? Was that you, Christine?
No,
Oh, who is that?
I mean, I said I agree, but then somebody else said something, but I didn't hear what they said.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I guess we're all in agreement.
Is anybody not in agreement? I don't see anybody in the chat that's not in agreement.
Okay, we'll keep going. All right, so we are told to choose this day whom we will serve. We learned that to choose means to make a choice. So how do we demonstrate making a choice? Anyone?
Voting.
Good. By voting. Now explain it. So the word, but before we get into that, let's look at what the word vote means. So the word vote, used as a transitive verb, means to choose, endorse, decide, the disposition of, defeat, or authorize someone or something by vote. And the word vote, used as a noun, means a formal indication of a choice between two or more candidates or courses of action, expressed typically through a ballot or a show of hands, or by voice. So we can make a choice by voting through a ballot, a show of hands, or by voice. Anyone have any comments or thoughts they want to add to that?
Well, yes,
Okay.
because only us, excuse me, only us in the United States who are citizens will be voting at this upcoming election. But there are lots of people around the world in this movement who will either vote in their mind, right? Because they won't officially go to a ballot box, or they'll be voting by their voice by endorsing what message they believe is correct.
That's a good point, Susan, that you bring up. That's a good point. And I mean, in additional to the fact that we know that the world is going through many elections. So
Correct.
yeah, so I mean, we know that the US election is like the center focus, but wherever people are around the world, with many elections happening this year, especially we can see that we are called to vote.
Yes, and it's very interesting that you brought that up too, because it made me recall under a YouTube video I was watching, people from other countries were weighing in and saying that, oh, we're so afraid of what the United States might choose, right? And I think it was, where did they just change their government from an authoritarian government back? Was it Brazil? One place that just had a election, and they're like, we chased out the right wing. We hope you will. You know, people are very watching and already deciding, like you just said, in their respective countries.
I don't know if that was Brazil or the French. But yeah, thank you, Susan, for your comment. Anyone else? We'll move on. All right. So choose equals vote, or we can say choose means vote. So we are called to vote. How does this look for us externally and internally? Anybody? Anyone want to share how this will look like internally and externally?
I'm going to go out on a limb. The internal is who we're following as leaders, as messengers, especially with the Sunday law, understanding the lines properly.
Okay, anyone else want to add or share their thoughts?
Okay, I'm so sorry, Elisa. Can you repeat that? Sorry, because we're kind of cutting off.
Yeah, so So the internal being who we're voting for, as in who's leading the message of Sunday law, and understanding the lines properly as the internal. External, I think we can see voting for a dictator or not.
Isabel, did you want to add or say something? Was that helpful for Alyssa to repeat?
I am so sorry, guys, because I just my
No,
grandson
that-
here and I just feel interruption.
Ava,
But Alisa's talking about internal only. Sorry, I'm just trying to be.
So with the understanding or following the leadership and the message, who's leading the message of understanding Sunday law correctly, that would be the internal. And then the external voting is going to be essentially Trump or Harris.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. Anyone else want to share before I share?
I
Michael,
think
go ahead.
I think it has been in the movement for so long. If we go back to 2014, beginning with the part of the just leaving the movement, I think it is just we did not have the idea of the voting system, but we are having it in our mind that, hey, those who left, they choose who they were going to follow based on the messages. And also with the message of Midnight Cry 2018, it's still the same happening over and over. Whenever a message comes, people decided who they are going to align themselves with, what message are they going to accept or not. So it has been happening in the movement for a long time. And now we are seeing it like externally, like in a real world, like, oh, this is what we have been doing, and it's also happening outside in the real world. But it has been there also in the world, but we did not take notice of that. So,
Thank you, Emmanuel.
May I just remark with what Emmanuel just commented about?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Emmanuel. We have been choosing all along the way inside the movement. Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about that like that. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else want to share a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit because I just remember hearing Chafa's Bowl and what was the other one? I think Alisa mentioned it. And I was trying to break it down, like, what does Apis Bowl mean? Because I was commenting here with my husband, and he says that it's for everybody. It's going to be different. So if some of us are loving money over our salvation or pleasure, I don't know, whatever it is. So that we have to include that.
Sorry, let me interrupt.
Go ahead, Victoria. I'm sorry. Were you gonna ask something?
Yeah, have you watched other test presentations on the APIS?
Oh, it's been a long time that I've watched this.
Yeah, I would suggest reviewing those. Her presentation on the APIS board. I know there's been many others who have added to and taught on the APIS board as well. Even our department has some. So yeah, I would review those presentations on the APIS board. Kind of follow up.
Okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Then I'll do that. And then I just wanted to add a comment regarding somebody put up in the chat regarding what's the point in voting now. And I wanted to say that going back to what was we've been told about fulfilling prophecy, right? So even what I'm saying is that prophecy is going to fulfill. no matter if you participated in it or not. But you still have to do everything in your power to stop, right? To stop certain things. Like, let me see. I'm not saying that you're stopping God from fulfilling prophecy, but there's two forces, right? The forces of God and the forces of the evil one. So we already know that the forces of the evil one is always going to be, try to kill everybody as soon as possible, try to make sure everybody gets lost. So that's why I'm looking at that in the sense that we have to still vote, even though it seems like, oh, it's not going to make a difference or it's not going to make a change, right? So we still have to vote, even though we're like, oh, well.
So yeah, so like that kind of goes into like where there are disengaged voters who don't really care about the elections, they're not really focusing on, they don't think their voice matters or their vote will matter. They really don't care about. Is that where you're going into? I hope us in the movement aren't really disengaged, but are not in disengaged, but yeah, I know that.
Yeah, and because I have some relatives like, oh, we're in the blue state. One of them, she's like, well, we're in a blue state. I don't have to vote because we're already, like Democratic. And then I spoke to one of the members, and then she's like, no, we still have to vote because there's still a lot of red areas in our state. We can't just assume. And also because you still have to go through the personal is political. So there's no neutrality anymore. So that's why I'm saying we still have to vote.
Yeah,
Not by what we see, but by what God expects from us.
Yeah, it is important.
Yeah, that was my comment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it is important. So externally, going back to my thoughts of what I've been thinking, and you can comment on whether you agree or disagree, but externally, people vote using ballots, and that's basically how we vote. That's so when it comes to election, we mark our vote. Internally, in our role as participants, we are also to participate in external elections and voting using ballots as well. Like that's similar, that's the same. And we know basically a ballot is just simply a sheet of paper what you use to mark a vote for local and general elections. However, as this pertains to inside the movement, I don't think that God is asking us as members to vote on leadership. God already has a leader set in place, Joshua. And so with this said, we either stick with God's choice or our own. The question goes back to which do you choose? And like Joshua, I declare, as for me, I will serve the Lord. There are multiple examples throughout inspiration that show us what results when God allows their people to choose a different leader other than the one God has chosen. And the outcome is never good. And we know that there was some talk before internally in the movement that there are many people who are ready to vote elder primary out or want to vote on leadership. So that those are my thoughts. If anybody wants to share their thoughts. If not, okay, go ahead.
Two quick points. I think what Ava, because she joins our morning Bible study, I think what Ava was trying to clarify, and I believe Elder Parmenter's most recent presentations also showed us that voting is our moral duty. And we know our morality by the lines because prophecy is what is our moral compass, right? And so what Ava, I think, was trying to say is that we're supposed to do everything within our power to stop the Sunday law from happening. Therefore, we would definitely all the more want to vote, right? To stop it from happening.
Thank you, Susan. All right. So back to the point of the outcome being never good, in which we choose a leader in which God has not chosen. I was wondering, what are some examples that we can look at that you can think of throughout the Bible that you can, note as examples of things happening that went wrong when God had a choice and the people wanted someone different? Oh,
The king, they chose Saul as a king.
yeah.
Samuel was hurt, and God said, don't worry, they didn't do anything to you. They just disregard me, God.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's a good example. Anyone else?
Yes, I have thought Moses and the Israelites in the wilderness.
Okay, good. Sure. I put the golden calf. Is it okay if I put the golden calf versus Moses, or is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Anyone else?
Jesus or Brett.
Good. It's another one I have.
You ready for another one, Victoria?
Yeah, go ahead.
The one, when the spies that went to Canaan, and the people had to make a choice. They either believed the doubtful, unbelievers spies, or they were going to believe Joshua and Caleb's report from Canaan.
Okay, so
They had to make a choice.
Okay, so who's the alternative to Joshua and Caleb?
Who were the alternative? The 10 spies.
Oh,
there were 12 spies
I
total, I
see.
think.
Okay. Any others?
In the Garden of Eden, God versus Satan.
Good. Yeah, I put the serpent versus Peter. Is that good, Alyssa? Is that you? What's that?
Yes.
Okay. So, sorry, slow typing here. But I'm getting through this. And then we have and then all right. So we have them all filled. So thank you for everyone, your participation. Any questions, thoughts, or comments of all that we've went through? We're coming to a close now. To summarize, we reviewed how we can overlay prior histories to understand our present time. We looked at the beginning of ancient Israel, specifically focusing on Joshua chapter 24, verse 15, which is a segment of Joshua as the second leader of Israel, final speech. In this verse, we noted two options of leaders or rulers to worship, one created in our own image, or the one true God, which could stand as God's chosen leadership, or the leader of or government that aligns with God's truth or will. We then learned that to choose means to vote, and what this means for us externally and internally of the movement. We know that as participants, our act is our act to vote is similar in the sense that we vote by ballot for elections happening in our regions of the world, just as a common person in our community. But internally, as members of this movement, we do not vote on leadership because God has already chosen who is to lead their people. And to choose a different leader other than God's choice only results in negative consequences, which we could see from the multiple examples throughout inspiration. All right, so that's the end. Any questions or thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking we do choose. We're not voting by ballot for an internal leader, but we are choosing in our mind and heart who is our internal leader. Therefore, by that choice, we're either following God or something else. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I just was referring back to that's true that you either you follow God's the leader that God has put in place, Elder Parmenter, that we follow the leader that God has, and that's basically making our choice. That by choosing to stay with the leader that God has placed and put in place for leadership, that we are making our choice, you know, and listening and following.
Yes.
So yeah, I agree.
Victoria,
Yeah.
so is God also choosing?
What do you mean? Is God also choosing?
Because as Susan said, we've been choosing all along. And here at this waymark, we know that the God is leading the movement and God has chosen the leadership. And we have several models that shows us, if you take, for example, of some women in the Bible, Ruth, Esther, we see at some point the king does choose the bride. So my question is, at this waymark, is God also choosing us with regards to our character?
So God has a chosen people. Is that what you're referring to? That we are called chosen? Is that what you're referring to? That God has an elect people, so therefore God, I mean, that's where my mind goes as you're speaking. That God is also choosing a people.
No, I was just focusing on the choosing internally. So I was wondering, you know, how do we vote, and who are we voting for internally?
So we know
Because
that
it just seems like the movement, there's only one movement and there's only one leader.
Mhm. So what do you mean as far as our participation externally in voting? I'm sorry, I'm not following. I don't
No,
think
internally, in the movement, internally.
with our choice or with God's choice? Because
Without
earlier
both.
Okay. So are you saying it's like a mutual is anyone else understanding Mary's question or following her? 'Cause,
Hi,
I'm
Victoria.
sorry. Hi, Lana.
So I guess the question, if I understand correctly, and this could, I may just have the same questions that I mean, I see that there is an internal in this history where Elder Jeff and Elder versus Elder Parmenter, but like what I think um Eva is asking is that what what is the internal? I mean, there is a vote on the external, right? But like, who is vote? I mean, is there some kind of vote going on? Like, I don't know of any of that, but like maybe there's something going on and I'm just have, so isolated. So it could be just the fact that maybe we're just not aware of this things going on. But like, as far as I know, there is no vote going on the internal. Is there? I may just, have no idea. Sorry, that's the question.
Maria, I'm sorry, Victoria. Maria, I'm wondering, the vote internally is many are called, but few are chosen. And it would seem to me that God is going to choose whom he is going to have as his counterpart, his partnership. And if you're on the wrong side, I don't care who you are or how long you've been in the movement, you're not going to be chosen. That's just the way I see it. It's an internal vote that you're making internally, and you're choosing just like Victoria's presentation, which has been excellent, by the way. Thank you for it. As for me and my house, I choose the Lord. And who are you choosing? And I don't care how much you talk or don't admit it. I think the elephant is in the room is, if you're against the leadership, it appears to me you're not going to be part of God's chosen. I mean, that may not be what we want to hear, because as human beings, we tend to construct our own thoughts and concerns. But if we're following methodology and rules, which you did so well in this presentation, Victoria, you cannot come up with anything other than what God has intended to do. And the vote is, many are called, but few are chosen. At least that's the way I see it.
Thank you, Marcia.
Another thought here that fits in with what we're talking about is that when we talk about God choosing, it's synonymous with our choice, because we're the ones who choose. And then based on that choice, then God chooses us. But God doesn't independently choose us separate from us making that choice ourselves. And I look back at such a familiar verse as John 3:16, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, right? And you read that, and then if you realize, in verse 17 and 18, it says, for God sent not, Jesus into the world to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved. So he that believes on him or chooses him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already. So we do have a choice, and the whole reason the controversy exists is because God gave us the power of choice. And that choice is not something that's made in a moment. God is merciful, and over the course of our lifetimes, we've had all kinds of rays of light, of truth that come to us. We have a choice all along the way to accept it, the rays of truth, and vote for it in our own hearts and follow it, or to reject it. And the accumulation of that ends up being whether God can choose us or not. Basically, God can't choose us if we're not following his ways and doing what we're asked to do. And as far as I understand, there's an invisible line of forbearance with God that every human being at some point in their life crosses. And once they cross that line in their life, God knows they're not going to change their mind, because they've already voted, but it wasn't a one-time vote. Although, yes, there were times when it came to whether they had to get on the ark or not, whether they were going to get on, and that was a vote in a sense. But they had already made up their minds long before that time they weren't going to get on the ark. So just as an example. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob.
Can I add something a little bit?
Yeah, please.
I'm not sure whether I've understood Makaria question, but there's something I want really to add. It might be odd, but it's just my opinion. I don't think God chooses. And by saying that, the more way to say, put it this way, like God accept our choice, and we choose God based on the methodology. And I don't think Elder Jeb or Elder Pemenda woke up in the morning one morning like, hey, I speak to God this morning and God told me this and that, and then they went and preached. It wasn't like that. They study God. They want to understand God. All of us, we want to understand God. And Al-Najib came up with the pattern of line to understand who God really is. And that's how we came up with the methodology. And also at the moment, I pick up from there, like, wow, this is a way to understand God. And he came up with the correct methodology. And this is what we are using right now. We are trying to understand God. And with God, they were like, this is what I'm really thinking about. This is my mind. Like, when you understand God, you enter into God's mind. And God will like accept all of us based on how we understanding God. So methodology is like a method of understanding who God is. And if we understand who God is, we will do things according to where God wants them to be done. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I was thinking about equality. And if you think about that in just an ordinary relationship, it means it's balanced. Both are operating in conjunction with one another. And so therefore I see it as God is choosing and we're choosing. It's reciprocal. It has to be reciprocal because as we choose, we're coming closer to God, and God is coming closer to us, and we're coming into more equality of mind. So that's how I see it. I don't see God just chooses us, randomly. And I do believe that we also have been making a choice all along the way, but so has God. And so that's what makes a true counterpart relationship, right? Because God doesn't want any kind of forced worship, right? We know that. And God wants someone who will truly love and worship God for the character that God is. And so I see it as a reciprocal relationship.
Thank you, Susan. Any other thoughts?
Yes. And I think it's kind of a reiteration of what I've said earlier, but because there was somebody who put a question in the chat about, so what's the internal vote or choice that we're making, especially in light of this morning's study on assigning a date to the Sunday law of being in July. And I'm going to tread very carefully because, again, I'm on the limb, but there's a challenge in that teaching, essentially, of who are we going to listen to? Are we going to listen to Elder Parminder? Or are we going to listen to somebody else who has put something else forward? And especially when a lot of people want to look for a woman to be a messenger, a leader, then that makes that message maybe even more appealing to some people. So I don't know if we're aware of how how scary this time that we're in is. But I think we really have to go to our Bible worker and to Elder Parminder and say, do I understand what's being taught correctly? That's all.
Thank you, Alyssa. That's very solemn. Anyone else?
Can I say something?
Who is speaking?
Elisa, now that she mentioned that, she really brought a good point, because I know that back in Germany, when there was a question asked about voting,
You are asleep.
and even though the voting,
At my friend's house.
so the voting, even though the voting was, in Germany, I think it was should have been understood that we all were voting worldwide for the question that Elder Parminder had brought about leadership, right? And regarding the female leader that I've not that I've heard anybody, but that there's a sentiment, or you cannot logically say that we don't have a female leader, but we also have probably forgotten that Elder Tess is still the leader, even though she's not physically, talking to us in our, she already has, given all the presentations that we still, I'm sure, haven't caught up with all the information she has given us. So we do have a representative. So we do have our, the female role model and the male role model. So we have two. We have two heads as our leadership. So at this point, I consider that our leader right now is Elder Parminder and Elder Tess. Yeah, that's my comment.
Can I make a
Yes,
quick
ma'am.
comment? So I just, I guess I wanted to throw in this thing that we, there was this, the ideas that were spoken about God still choosing us, so few are chosen, right? So I think that in terms of leadership, God has, chosen his leaders from the beginning. And we know that based on the lines, right? But in terms of personal, like individual people, I think God has already made a choice, no? When Jesus died for us, Jesus basically vouched for each one of us. So it's really not up to God at this point to make a choice towards God, but it is up to us. But in terms of leadership, God had already chosen his leadership. I don't know. I may be wrong. Maybe God is still, deciding whether some of us aren't fit. So, but I think in terms of leadership, it's kind of on the lines. Yeah, that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mama. Anyone else? Right. Would someone like to close in prayer?
I will.
Thank you.
Almighty God, we thank you for coming together on your Sabbath. We thank you for this time together, for opening our hearts to all that we need to understand still. Impress it upon our hearts that time is running low. Give us the impetus to make this change of heart that we need. to fully understand your word and your will, so that we may be able to stand and escape from imprisonment. Give us the courage to ask the necessary questions, to think beyond what somebody of authority might be telling us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.